"Sir, this line is for business clients only." The woman's tone was sharp, her smile fake. Derek paused, briefcase in hand, custom navy suit perfectly pressed, gold watch catching the morning light. He looked behind him, then back at her. "I am a business client," he said calmly. She crossed her arms, glancing at the other tellers. "You need to wait over there, sir. This counter is for serious accounts." A couple of customers snickered. Derek's jaw clenched, but his voice stayed steady. "Serious accounts?" he repeated, almost amused. Another banker leaned in, whispering, "Security's watching, man, don't make a scene." Derek smiled. That kind of smile people mistake for surrender. He took a deep breath, placed his briefcase on the marble counter, and opened it. Inside were documents embossed with gold, ownership certificates, signed contracts, and a single folder labeled acquisition terms. The woman blinked, confused. Derek checked his watch. "In about 7 minutes, he said softly. "This branch will be under new management." The laughter died instantly. He wasn't bluffing. Derek Cole had learned early in life that silence could be louder than anger. Born and raised in Atlanta, he grew up watching his mother balance 3 jobs while still finding time to read him bedtime stories about men who built empires from nothing. Those stories became his blueprint. By 38, Derek had turned a small tech startup into Cole Dynamics, a company valued at over $400 million. He wore his success quietly, tailored suits, old-school manners, a voice that could fill a room without ever rising. But no amount of success could completely erase the sting of the assumptions that followed his skin color. That morning, he walked into Millstone National Bank not to ask for help, but to finalize a major acquisition. The irony? He was about to purchase the very financial institution that had once rejected his business loan. The branch manager, Richard Hale, didn't know that part. To him, Derek was just another walk-in client. "Sir, can I help you?" Richard asked, glancing at him with polite impatience. Derek offered a smile. "I'm here to meet with your regional director, Melissa Grant." "She's not available," Richard replied quickly. "Perhaps I can assist you instead." Derek hesitated. He could tell the man hadn't checked anything. No call, no message, not even a glance at the appointment list. He just assumed. "I believe she's expecting me," Derek said, sliding a sleek leather folder across the counter. Richard's expression froze when he saw the embossed initials on the document. CD Holdings Group, the name that had been circulating in their internal memos for months. Before Richard could speak, another employee, Laura, approached. She looked Derek up and down, lips pursed. "Sir, if you're here to make a deposit, you'll need to take a seat. This area's for executive clients only." The words hung heavy in the air. A few customers turned their heads, some curious, others uncomfortable. Derek let out a quiet sigh, the kind that comes from years of having to prove himself over and over again. "I see," he said softly. "And what does an executive client look like exactly?" Laura blinked, unsure if he was joking. "Well, they usually have appointments," she stammered. Derek smiled again, though his eyes didn't. "Then I guess you'll be seeing a lot of me today." He turned his wrist slightly, glancing at the time. 9:23 a.m. 7 minutes. The acquisition deal was scheduled to close at 9:30 sharp, when all ownership rights of Millstone National Bank would legally transfer to Cole Dynamics Holdings. Derek had personally insisted the first visit he made as the new owner would be to this very branch, the one that had once told him his business model wasn't the right fit for their portfolio. Richard cleared his throat, starting to sense the tension. "Sir, maybe you can wait in the lobby until—" Before he could finish, the glass doors opened. 2 corporate representatives in grey suits entered, carrying sealed envelopes. They walked straight to Derek, shook his hand, and handed him the documents. Every eye in the room followed the scene. Richard's voice trembled. What's going on?" Derek looked at him calmly. "You'll find out in about 7 minutes." He didn't raise his tone, he didn't gloat. He just stood there, a picture of quiet control. A man who had once been told no so many times that yes no longer surprised him. The tick of the wall clock grew louder. 25 a.m. Richard shifted, nervously pretending to busy himself with some paperwork, but his eyes never left Derek. Laura whispered something to another teller, and a ripple of murmurs spread across the lobby. Derek stayed exactly where he was, calm, still, and patient. The kind of patience that comes from knowing exactly how the next few minutes will unfold. He checked his watch again. 5 minutes, sir, Richard finally said, stepping forward. I think there's been some misunderstanding. You can't just walk in here and... And what? Derek interrupted quietly, turning toward him. His voice wasn't angry. It was surgical. You mean I can't stand where I'm not expected to stand? Laura crossed her arms defensively. That's not what he meant. Derek's gaze met hers, steady, unflinching. No, I think that's exactly what he meant. Before anyone could respond, the door to the inner offices swung open. A woman in her early 40s stepped out, polished, confident, with a clipboard tucked under her arm. Melissa Grant, the regional director. Mr. Cole, she greeted warmly, striding straight toward him. Her apologies for the delay. Traffic on 6th was awful. The sudden shift in tone froze the room. Richard's face went pale. You know him, he stammered. Melissa looked puzzled. Of course. We've been finalizing his acquisition paperwork for weeks. Didn't you receive the notice? Laura blinked rapidly. Acquisition? What acquisition? Derek adjusted his cufflinks, his expression unreadable. The one where Cole Dynamics Holdings becomes the majority shareholder of Millstone National Bank. The words hit like a thunderclap. Melissa handed Richard a sealed document. That's the final confirmation. As of 9:30 a.m., this branch will officially operate under Mr. Cole's ownership group. The silence was thick. No one dared breathe. A man in a hoodie who'd been waiting in line muttered, You're kidding. Richard's voice cracked. You're the new owner. Derek smiled faintly. Surprising, isn't it? 7 years ago, this same bank wouldn't even approve a $20,000 loan for my first office. Said my business didn't fit their model. No one spoke. He turned, scanning the branch, the marble floors, the polished counters, the same kind of cold professionalism he'd once faced as an outsider. But I guess the model changed, he said softly. The clock clicked. 9:29 a.m. Melissa glanced at him. We'll begin the transfer in 1 minute. Richard swallowed hard, forcing a laugh that didn't land. Look, Mr. Cole, I think maybe we just got off on the wrong foot. No, Derek said, his tone even. You got off on the only foot you ever use. The words weren't shouted, but they carried weight. He took a slow breath, gathering himself, not out of pride, but out of discipline. He knew that if he showed even a flicker of anger, they'd call it aggression. So instead, he let silence do the talking. 30. Melissa pressed a button on her tablet. It's done, she said. Congratulations, Mr. Cole. You now own Millstone National Bank. The branch fell into stunned quiet. And then, Derek finally spoke. Good, he said, because there's some restructuring that needs to start right here. For a long moment, no one moved. Richard's mouth opened slightly, as if searching for words that refused to come. Laura's cheeks flushed red, the way people blush when they realize they've been caught in the mirror of their own assumptions. Derek didn't gloat. He just looked around at the marble floors, the high ceilings, the polished steel letters spelling Millstone National Bank. He'd been here before, but back then, he hadn't looked like this. His voice was calm, but his memory wasn't. Flashback, 7 years earlier. A younger Derek stood in this same lobby. His suit wasn't designer. It was from a clearance rack, sleeves slightly too long, briefcase scuffed from years of trying. He was pitching his startup to anyone. Who would listen? But that day, the loan officer barely made eye contact. I'm sorry, Mr. Cole, the man had said, sliding his papers back across the desk. Your projections are ambitious. Maybe come back when your numbers are more realistic. Derek had smiled politely, thanked him, and walked out. But as soon as the glass doors closed behind him, that smile had broken. He'd stood on the sidewalk for a long minute, pretending to check his phone so no one would see the disappointment in his eyes. That humiliation had burned, not because of the rejection, but because he knew why the man hadn't believed in him. Now standing in that same space, 7 years older, he turned to Richard. I want to tell you a story, Derek began. His tone was measured, his posture precise. A while back, a young black entrepreneur came here asking for a small business loan. The numbers were solid, the plan was airtight, but the loan officer, this branch actually, said no. Richard tried to speak, but Derek held up a hand. He didn't argue, he didn't shout, he just left. But that rejection, that was fuel. The lobby was silent except for the hum of air conditioning. Now, Derek continued, that same man owns the very place that told him he wasn't worth investing in. Melissa stood to the side, watching the exchange. She'd seen plenty of corporate takeovers, but never one that felt personal. Richard swallowed hard. "Mr. Cole, You what?" Derek asked quietly. "You didn't mean it? You were following policy?" He shook his head. "That's the thing about policy. It's only neutral until you see who it's protecting." Laura looked down, tears forming in the corners of her eyes. She wasn't cruel, just conditioned. She'd never thought her words, her tone, her doubt could cut so deep. Derek sighed softly. "I don't want apologies. I don't even want excuses. I just want this place to be better than it was when I walked in 7 years ago." He turned to Melissa. "Effective immediately, this branch is under review. Every employee will undergo new equity and conduct training. And as for management," he looked at Richard, who froze. "I think it's time to reevaluate leadership." Melissa nodded solemnly. "Understood." Derek gathered his papers and closed his briefcase. "I'm not firing you," he said, "but I'm giving you a chance to see the world through the same door you once made me walk out of." Richard's eyes fell. "I understand." Derek turned toward the window. Outside, sunlight hit the glass just right. The same glass that had once reflected a man who was told he wasn't enough. Now it reflected someone who had turned rejection into empire. As Derek stepped toward the glass doors, the entire lobby watched him, not as a customer, not as a stranger, but as a man who had just rewritten the balance of power with quiet grace. Outside, the morning sun was sharp and golden. Across the street, a few photographers had already gathered. Word of the acquisition had leaked minutes before the announcement. The moment he pushed open the doors, a dozen microphones pointed his way. "Mr. Cole, is it true you now own Millstone National Bank? Is this payback for the loan rejection years ago? Do you plan to fire the entire branch staff?" Derek paused on the steps, the city noise swirling around him, car horns chatter, the hum of traffic. His security team tried to clear space, but he raised a hand gently. "It's okay," he said. "Let them ask." A young journalist in a grey coat leaned forward. "Sir, people online are calling this poetic justice. Do you agree?" Derek looked down for a moment, then met her gaze. "Justice," he said softly, "isn't about humiliation. It's about evolution." The crowd went still. "When I walked into that bank years ago, I was treated like I didn't belong. But what hurt more wasn't the rejection. It was how ordinary it felt. Like it was something I was supposed to get used to." He adjusted his cufflinks, sunlight reflecting off the silver edges. "So today isn't revenge," he continued. "It's a reminder that doors don't stay closed forever. Sometimes you don't have to break them down, sometimes you just buy the building." The reporters exchanged glances, some smiling faintly. "But what about the staff inside?" one asked. "You humiliated them publicly." Derek shook his head. "No, I showed them a mirror. What they do with their reflection, that's up to them." The cameras clicked rapidly. Every quote felt like something that would travel across headlines before noon. Behind him, through the glass doors, Richard stood silently with Melissa, watching. Laura had tears streaming down her face, a mix of guilt and realization. Derek didn't look back, but he spoke as if they could hear him. "Change doesn't start with a press release," he said. "It starts with one uncomfortable truth at a time." He took a step down the stairs, then another. A man passing by, older, in a delivery uniform, paused and said quietly, "Proud of you, brother." Derek smiled for the first time that morning. "Thank you," he said. He walked toward his car, the noise behind him fading. But just as he reached the door, his phone buzzed. It was a message from his mother. "Your father would be proud. He always said one day you'd own the same place that told him no." Derek's eyes softened. He closed the phone gently, a breath catching in his chest. The story wasn't about him anymore. It was about the generations that came before him, the ones who never got to walk through those doors. The city skyline shimmered in the afternoon light as Derek's car pulled up to the glass tower of Cole Dynamics headquarters. From the top floor he could see everything, the streets he used to walk, the neighborhoods that raised him, and now, the very bank that once turned him away. He set his briefcase down, loosened his tie, and let out a slow breath. The silence of the office felt different today, heavier but peaceful. His assistant, Maya, knocked lightly and stepped inside. "The press conference numbers just came in," she said with a grin. "You're trending everywhere. People are calling it the 7-minute turnaround." Derek chuckled softly. "Catchy, but I didn't do it for the trend." Maya hesitated. "You sure you don't want to celebrate? You did something historic today." He turned toward the window, hands in his pockets. "No, Maya. History's only worth something if it teaches." She nodded, sensing his tone. "Then what comes next?" Derek's eyes wandered across the skyline. Tall buildings, billboards, glass reflections of ambition and ego. "Next, we make sure no one else has to buy their way into being respected." He walked to his desk, opened a folder labeled Community Division Proposal, and slid a few papers across. "I want a new program. Low-interest startup loans for young entrepreneurs, especially those who've been turned down before." Maya smiled. "You're turning the same no into opportunity." "That's the point," he said. "We don't move forward by getting even. We move forward by lifting the floor so no one else starts where we did." Outside, the sun dipped lower, turning the skyline gold. Derek's reflection merged with the city's, a man who'd climbed from rejection to ownership, but never forgot the climb. He reached for his father's old watch on the desk, scratched, worn, still ticking after all these years. He fastened it to his wrist, whispering under his breath, 7 minutes changed my life, but 7 years built me for it." He looked out one last time, then turned off the lights and walked out of the office. As the door closed, the camera lingered on the glass wall, his name shining in gold letters, Coal Dynamics Holdings. Underneath it, a reflection of the city. Still divided in places, still struggling, but slowly, steadily changing.